Howdy folks, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles, and as you can tell from this starting screen, what we're looking at today is a Tier 9 ranked battle. And this, in the USS Fletcher, is Hans von Special. Now if you're thinking to yourself, hang on, I for some strange reason feel as if I should know that name. Well then congratulations, you probably watch Flambass on Twitch, because this is none other than he. This is his North American server account. You see, he managed to rank out on his EU account in 4 days with 93 games played. And since the season was still going on, he thought, well, I'll try and do the same thing again on the North American server. The only problem was he only has one Tier 9 ship on the North American server, and this is it, the USS Fletcher. The Fletcher wouldn't have been his first pick for Tier 9 ranked. It's certainly not a bad ship. It's a very, very good ship, but it does lack a certain amount of utility. It doesn't have hydroacoustic search, and it doesn't have radar. But it's the only Tier 9 ship he's got on this server, so he doesn't have a huge amount of choice. And, you know, it's still the Fletcher. It's still a pretty good ship. So, as you can see by the indicator showing the direction of the closest enemy ship, he has the radar position finding skill. He doesn't have the IFHE skill though, but that's not unusual for high-tier American destroyers in particular. Because these 5-inch guns, even with IFHE fire and high explosive, can only penetrate 27mm of armour. It's not that IFHE isn't useful on a high-tier American destroyer. It's just not nearly as useful at this kind of level as it is at Tier 5, for example. Because even with IFHE, his high explosive shells will only penetrate 27mm of armour, which doesn't help him at all against any of the battleships that he's going to fight. And he doesn't need against almost all of the destroyers that he's going to fight. It's only really useful when fighting similar tier cruisers. There are far, far better things that a Tier 9 or 10 American destroyer captain can spend 4 skill points on. It's an entirely different matter down at, for example, Tier 5 in the USS Nicholas, where you have the exact same caliber guns, but your enemies have a lower armour threshold. And take an IFHE in the Nicholas allows you to deal damage to everything that you're going to fight with your high explosive shells, battleships included. Since the enemy have just flipped Bravo, the Buffalo has just popped his radar. Unfortunately, he's done it from around about 12 kilometers away from the enemy cap circle. It's not a complete waste of time, however, because the enemy Fletcher has just sailed into radar range, and Hans gets the first salvo off with a broadside salvo of armour piercing. Yes, armour piercing, not high explosive, although he's switching to high explosive now that the Fletcher is starting to angle away. Why is that? Well, technically he could have probably done just as well with high explosive in his initial salvo. Unmodified 5-inch high explosive shells have 20mm of penetration, and the Fletcher only has 19mm of armour. If you find yourself shooting at a gearing under the same circumstances, however, armour piercing is the better choice, because the gearing has some surprisingly trollish 21mm of midship belt plating and will shatter high explosive shells. Quite a disappointing first exchange. You would have expected him to be able to do more damage than that to the enemy Fletcher. I mean, he had him at a distinct disadvantage, pinned up against an island, broadside on, with only really one way that the enemy Fletcher could go. You would have expected the initial armour-piercing volleys to have done more damage than that, but it is what it is. At the moment, he's probably wishing that he was in something British like the Jutland, or something German like the Z-46. He keeps looking in the direction of where the enemy Fletcher went, and he's looking for torpedoes, but without hydro, he's not going to see them in the smokescreen until the last possible second. Speaking of torpedoes, one of his has just found a target, probably the Jean Bart, and has caused flooding. And while we're on the subject of damage over time, it's useful to remember that not taking the IFHE skill also means that you're going to set more fires. And since his high explosive shells can't really damage enemy battleships anyway, unless he hits them in the superstructure, fires are really, really good. And as anticipated, here come the Fletcher's torpedoes, but he'd already positioned the ship in such a way to minimise his cross-section, and is relatively easily able to avoid them all. It's at this point where I'd like to draw your attention to the positioning of both of the teams. Everybody on Hans's team is all clustered together in the exact same spot, shooting at the same 3 targets, and so far not doing a very good job of sinking any of them. And just as I was wondering where the enemy Georgia and the Ibuki had gotten to, the Georgia just revealed its location by firing from the other end of the map. Now, the friendly Buffalo just got taken out by the enemy Musashi. And hopefully the team can continue to mass their fire on the Jean Bart over there and sink it before it gets away. But the overall positioning of the two teams is heavily in favour of the enemy team. With the Georgia on the eastern flank and the Fletcher no doubt also sneaking around behind the rest of Hans's team, they're now caught in a crossfire. And they've just lost the Buffalo, their only radar, so they can probably expect some torpedoes coming from the Fletcher behind them very, very soon. The Ibuki just popped up, so we know that it's just the Georgia on the flank, but what we could really use now is for that Fletcher to make some kind of incredibly stupid pants-on-head mistake. And he obliges us by doing just that. Well, to be fair, it wasn't that stupid. It's the kind of mistake that's very easy to make. Do you see his anti-aircraft guns going off? The Georgia just launched his fighter, and the Fletcher forgot to turn off his AA guns and secondaries. So, on the one hand, the team have lost their Buffalo, and therefore their only source of radar. But on the other hand, the Georgia's secondaries have just murdered the Fletcher, so they don't really need the radar as much as they might otherwise. I mean, it would have still been nice to have, not to mention the DPM from the Buffalo, but they're no longer going to get surprised by any enemy destroyers. But that's just about the only good news that's available at the moment. The enemy team still have two of the caps, they're still ahead on points, and that enemy Georgia in particular is in an extremely dangerous position. And since Hans isn't actually going to be shooting at anything for the immediate future, let's just take a look at the minimap in closer detail and see exactly how the rest of his team is dealing with the threat posed by that Georgia. The reason crossfires are so dangerous is because it's impossible to angle your armour against every threat. Right now, with that Georgia driving into them from the east, he's basically thrown the cat amongst the pigeons. You can look at them and they're all panicking. They don't know which way to turn. The Lion and the Izumo are given a perfect broadside target to the Georgia to the west while trying to angle against the Frederick the Grey to the Musashi and the rest of the enemies to the north. And I think the only reason they're not getting hammered right now is because of what the friendly Georgia is doing. Look at this. What on earth? Why on earth is he passing that island on the right-hand side? It's the worst possible thing he could do. He's probably about to run into a bunch of torpedoes from the Ibuki to the north, and he's forced to give broadside at what is practically point-blank range for a ship armed with 18-inch guns to the enemy Georgia, and he can't manoeuvre because he's got an island on his left-hand side. If he'd gone around the left-hand side of the island, he would have been protected from the guns of the Jean Bart and the Ibuki and the Georgia, as well as the Ibuki's torpedoes. He would have had to face the Frederick the Great and the Musashi further to the northwest, but you can angle against them. Well, okay, you can't really angle against the Musashi's 18-inch guns, but you can reduce your target profile by pointing your bows towards them, and you're not at the same time giving broadside to anybody else. By contrast, the friendly Iowa down to the south seems to be the only one with a clear idea of what he's doing. That's a fantastic position. Tucked in behind that island, the only thing that can shoot at him is the enemy Georgia, and he's got his bows pointed towards him. So, of course, the Iowa immediately leaves the best possible position he could be in, and then turns to give broadside to the Georgia's 18-inch guns. So, he's about to die. Meanwhile, thankfully, the Lion and the Izumo have at least taken the island ahead of them on the left-hand side, so that they're only getting shot at by the Musashi and the Frederick the Great. But that Iowa has just signed his death warrant. Yep, there he goes. Well, while we were focused on the minimap and watching the Iowa and the Georgia commit pointless acts of suicide, we did miss a couple of things, so let's go back to recap. The reason that we had all of that free time to examine events on the minimap in greater detail was because Hans was being very careful to not draw any attention to himself and thus get himself obliterated while he was finishing the process of capturing Alpha. Now he's done that. Shortly after the Georgia pointlessly threw his ship away, and at around about the same time the Iowa was doing pretty much exactly the same thing, he did manage to land some very useful torpedo hits on the Musashi and the Frederick the Great. And so now, thanks to Hans, the team are in possession of 2 of the caps, but the enemy team are more than 200 points and 2 kills ahead. And with that, I think we're about all caught up. So, what to do? Well, the Georgia's probably heading south after killing the Iowa to flip Bravo. And he has just popped up, but oh, he's changing course and heading north. Okay. Well, we'll pop some fish in the water against the Jean Bart, and it's probably wise not to head any further east. He's right on the limit of being detected by the Jean Bart, and the Jean Bart is fairly quick as battleships go, so let's just err on the side of caution here. Keep an eye on what the Georgia's doing. Keep some distance on the Jean Bart and wait to see what happens with the torpedoes. Are all going to miss, aren't they? Yeah. Well, that's a bit of a blow to morale. Now he knows where you are, or he knows where you were when you fired off the torpedoes. Hang on a second, what's he shooting at? And the Ibuki too. What? Oh, you've got to be kidding. The Chuckle brothers in the Lion and the Izumo, who were in a perfect position to hide behind the island while shooting at the Frederick the Great and Musashi to their north, have decided that that's far too hipster for them. They'd far rather sail out from behind the cover of the island so they can get shot at by 5 enemy ships, 3 of whom have their broadsides to shoot out rather than just 2. So that's kind of depressing. Yeah, I'm laughing, but it's fake laughing, only the tears are real. Just about the only bright spot on this otherwise thoroughly gloomy horizon is that between the 2 of them, the Lion and the Izumo finally managed to finish off the Musashi. So we're sinking an enemy ship at a rate of around about 1 every 6 minutes. So if we can just keep this up for another 24 minutes, we've got this game won. Oh, hang on. Ah, yeah. Well, hopefully that set of torpedoes can do something useful. Hang on a minute, what's the Georgia doing? Actually, those torpedoes do look very good, but what is the Georgia doing? He's changing course again. It's like he can't make his mind up which way he wants to go. Oh, those torpedoes do look very, very, very useful. I think he's going to get them both, the Ibuki and the Jean Bart. And it might even be enough to sink them both. Oh, there goes the Ibuki. And is that going to be enough to kill the Jean Bart? No, no, not enough. Only the 1 torpedo hitting the Jean Bart. But hell, there's the high caliber award. 121,000 damage done. Georgia's behind the island. Oh, great, we've lost the Izumo. Well, it was only a matter of time. I mean, when you're sailing up against the map border, giving broadside to every gun on the enemy team, it's only a matter of time before you die. It looks like the Frederick the Great has turned around, is running south, and for the moment at least has some island cover. But the Georgia, yeah. What is he doing? Oh, he is... Okay. Good news, bad news situation. We know exactly where the Georgia is. He's inside the cap circle. He's flipping it. He's right on the other side of that rock. I mean, he could have, and probably should have done this 5 minutes ago, right after he killed the Iowa. But I'm pleased at least he's made his mind up. But that isn't really good news. I mean, yeah, we know where the Georgia is. He's flipping the cap, which means that Hans's team now have none of them. But Hans has taken great care to stay hidden while his torpedoes reload, because that Georgia must be just a couple of 100 meters away. Oh, and he is. Surprise! It's me! Now, of course, the Jean Bart secondaries are no joke, and neither are the Georgias, so pop the smoke. And of course he didn't actually fire his guns, it was just the Georgia spotting him, and now that the Georgia is dead, well, the Jean Bart is no longer capable of shooting at him. But, well, then again, the Jean Bart is about to go down and is shooting at the Lion, and isn't going to be in a position to shoot at anything for too much longer, although his secondaries are. And while the Jean Bart does have a lot of long-range secondaries, there are mostly 100mm in caliber, so they're not that much danger to anything other than a destroyer. Hans, you're in the destroyer. Oh, and the Frederick the Great secondaries, which are dangerous to everything, are also shooting. You really need to put that Jean Bart down very, very quickly and get him to cover behind this island. And he's done that much at least. Now he just needs to stop getting shot at by the Frederick the Great, because those secondaries are no laughing matter. Okay, we're good. So, what's the line up to? Is he still giving broadside to everything? Kind of. Actually, no, he's changing course and angling away. Okay, so that's good. Just the Frederick the Great left. Now, at this point of a battle, when you're facing the last ship alive on the enemy team, it's usually because they're either really, really good, or they're not. Yeah, let's just be diplomatic and say, not good. So which do we think this Frederick the Great is? Is he the last ship left alive on his team because he's just that good? Or is he the kind of guy who, even knowing that there's a destroyer on his flank about 6 kilometers away, even when the destroyer starts taking the piss and shooting at him to advertise his presence, continues to sail on the same course and speed, eating almost all of the torpedoes? Or perhaps he really is that good, and he just stopped caring. Well, draw your own conclusions once you've seen the post-battle results. For now, all I'm going to say is, holy shit. I mean, I've seen teams that needed carrying, but this is one of the better ones. And when I say better, I, of course, mean worst. And yet, somehow, Hans von Special was able to carry this team, kicking and screaming, all the way to a thoroughly undeserved victory. For them, that is. Not him. He totally deserved it. And I hope you lot enjoyed it, because that's it for today. As always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.